Please welcome Mathew Mercer, Steve Danuser, Taryn Gregory, and Christie Golden.
I love you too. So welcome everyone to a fantastic panel here discussing the storytelling and narrative of World of Warcraft, the game that has consumed my life wonderfully for many years, and I'm sure many of yours as well. So before we go ahead and jump into that, let me introduce this panel that I'm very excited to introduce to you. Many faces you may have seen at BlizzCon. First, we'll begin with the man who's responsible for a lot of the driving story of the game from now, past, and beyond. We have the senior narrative designer on World of Warcraft, Steve Danuser.
Right. This is awesome. Such an honor to be here. Thanks everybody for coming.
Hey, and then next to you, my friend, we have the fantastic in-game cinematic director, the project director for World of Warcraft, jumping into the fantastic reveal of Wrathgate back when the Wrath of the Lich King expansion hit, and since has helped also drive the narrative focus of the game cinematically forward. We have Terran Gregory.
Citizens of Azeroth. Behold.
And last but definitely not least, we have the extremely talented senior writer at Blizzard and New York Times best-selling author responsible for 13 World of Warcraft novels since the year 2000, the fantastic Christie Golden. So between the three of you guys, there's quite an expansive narrative that you, amongst many other people on your teams, have been crafting over the years. I want to ask, for each one of you, what is your responsibility, your focus responsibility on building this story?
Yeah, so my piece is the in-game stuff. So I get to work with our phenomenal design team. We have a ton of quest designers, a ton of other designers, and I take the dialogue, the quest text, make sure that our characters have consistent voice, there's a continuity of story. I work with our incredible VO team to go into sessions and record the voiceover, make sure that we get the performances that we need for the game. And then I get to work with these guys and talk about what we have going on in the game and how they can help bring that to life through their specialties. So I have the ultimate nerd dream job, really.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Not too bad. Yeah. And you, Taryn, what do you bring to the table, my friend?
Well, I've been directing in-game cinematics on World of Warcraft for about 12 years now, as Matt mentioned, starting with the Wrathgate and every expansion since. I work with a team of other directors. There's many of us, really, cinematic directors at Blizzard Entertainment in the Blizzard Animation division, and we've really branched out over the last few years with different storytelling mediums, from the pre-rendered cinematics that we develop to the in-game cinematics that go into the game, as well as the 2.5D motion graphic pieces you may have seen for Warlords and for Legion. And each one of those is a different division within our story and franchise development, and all of those are created lovingly by our team with the best effort of supporting and enforcing the Warcraft narrative and pushing our characters forward.
Wonderful. And then over next to you, of course, we have Christie. You've been with this project extremely long as well, developing it from the book and narrative standpoint for the written format. What have been the most interesting elements of that responsibility, and how has it been working with these teams to help craft that world?
Well, I came in before there was even a World of Warcraft, and so I got a chance to create some of the characters in that they were established, but I got to flesh them out, get inside their heads, help grow their story a little bit in conjunction always very closely with Blizzard. So I've really gotten to get inside the heads of so many characters over the years, and coming here, being able to bring just all that knowledge and then work with people like Taryn. By the way, Taryn and I have a standing meeting every single day, and it is always so much fun. One of our producers came by and says, "You guys look like you're having a really good time," and we are. So I'm now able to branch out a little bit and do comics, song lyrics. You may recall Mr. Mercer over here performing Kobolds and Catacombs. Yes, I co-wrote the lyrics for that, so that was very exciting.
So I didn't know that until recently, and I was super excited to find out.
Yeah, so I have my fingers in many pies now, and it's a lot of fun.
Heck yeah. Now, on that regard, this is a cross-medium way of telling the story as it continues to progress and develop. Aside from your standing meeting, what is it like having to take all these disparate elements together and make sure that it's one consistent, uniform story? Like, that sounds like a very Herculean effort. I imagine you probably suffer quite a bit at the top of that.
Well, it's a huge team effort. It takes a lot of people, and it takes everybody's passion and commitment, because if there was anybody who didn't care, who didn't put 100% into it, it wouldn't work. But we've got a phenomenal team across the company of people doing that. So we love telling stories. We love weaving these from the game into other mediums. And I think we've spent a lot of time, especially in recent expansions, trying to say, rather than having an expansion like Burning Crusade that kind of tells a self-contained story, how do we weave these from one into the next? And we do that through the other medium that come out in between these big expansions. And our patch content, especially for Legion, has gotten a lot more, on a regular cadence, a lot more depth and involvement. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was about to say, like with every progressive expansion in recent years, the focus of the consequences of what the decisions in these stories have become more intense. For those who haven't played Warcraft in a while and may have stepped away, I don't think you realize quite how much has changed in recent years, beyond scarring the surface of the actual planet Azeroth and Cataclysm, and in recent years with Legion, going off-world and...
Yeah, if you haven't been to Silithus lately, you might want to. There's been some modifications. We get the world stabbed by a giant sword. We've gone to the seat of the Pantheon and seen the Titans, these legendary figures that shape the universe. The story has really gotten super cosmic, and yet it's got all these characters that make it really relatable on a human level. Because at the end of the day, whether you're an elf, a dwarf, or a gnome, or whatever, it's still a human connection that we need to get across. So I'm so grateful for folks like this that really help us connect on that human level.
I love that. And to that point, too, with all these major moments that are happening, all these creators who aren't afraid to essentially break their baby, which I think is a really important thing of making evocative storytelling. How is it taking these moments they say, oh, by the way, you're stabbing the planet with a sword, make it happen?
Stabbing the planet with a sword was not quite as hard as killing the Alliance King. Everyone's
still
like,
bitter.
Every one of these stories comes up and it's like, oh, we're going to do something utterly, terribly brutal. I'm both terrified and really excited as a storyteller to dive deep in that story and see what we can tell it in the most effective way possible. But in the instance of if anyone's churned out of the game, hasn't been back to Azeroth for a while, when we were working on the cinematic for Sargeras manifests and stabs a sword into the planet, it was kind of one of the most conceptually mega things. I think we were all sitting around going, are we really doing this? Yeah, we're going to go to 11 on that one. So definitely some amazing events have happened, and more amazing events are lined up in the near future for World of Warcraft.
Yeah, you'll see soon enough. And to that degree, too, when you're playing the game, you're playing as your own character. You're immersed in the world, but you're definitely kind of watching and interacting with these large stories and these major lore characters. Christie, you had the opportunity through these books over many years of giving the people who play or love the Warcraft universe the chance to see through the eyes of these characters and really kind of show what makes them tick and what their mindset is in a first-person perspective. What is it like having to develop that with the team and the excitement of being able to tell these internal stories and perspectives in a world where otherwise the players wouldn't have the opportunity?
Well, it's when you're doing media tie-in work, it's always with the team. First of all, you're never just sitting in your room coming up with these things by yourself. You're always touching base and stuff, and I really enjoy that aspect. So for me, it's been pretty easy to move into a situation where I'm part of a team and I have meetings and I check in with people and we share communication. Somebody's always got your back. I work with the best people. I really, really do. So that's always really exciting. And I'm actually theater trained, so I kind of play the role when I'm writing, and I kind of get into the character's head that way. And it's very rewarding getting feedback from people. And we do try to acknowledge where we can. Anything that the player has done, we'll make a nod to something that happened. A wanderer approached him and had given him some piece of advice or something. And people really like that because they're part of this. As you say, they're helping co-create as they play. So it's pretty neat.
And
I think it's... Oh, go ahead.
And your theater background has come in useful when we're assembling early versions of movies, and she has played several of the parts in the temporary mixes, and it would be... Man, if one day you could hear me and her as, an orc and a human...
We have a weekly meeting where we go over some of the cinematic scripts for things that are upcoming. And these guys love to dig into. I think they try to one-up each other. Everybody's like, "Yeah, I'm more of an orc than you." It's a lot of fun.
It's true.
A little playful competition never hurt anyone.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yet. But playing off that, kind of what you're talking about, making the player feel more immersed in the story. I've played many MMOs through the years. Believe it or not, I'm an indoor kid, very heavily. And what I've really loved is, from the player standpoint, you guys have done a really good job of not just having them be a bystander to the story, not just being a faceless individual as part of a nearby army that helped accomplish a goal. You've built a narrative where the player becomes progressively more important and is directly interacting with these very important story characters. That to me has been a really cool focus. And how interesting has that been to develop that? And do you have any teases for where that might be going?
Well, I mean, that's the center of what we do at Blizzard. Like, right on our statue, one of our core values is about gameplay. And so we love story, we care about story, and we want the players to be the driving forces in the in-game story. So it's the things you do, the ways that you interact with these big iconic heroes and stuff, that really does shape the world. It's really cool that in some of our more recent cinematics now, we have the ability to work the player into the cinematics. So you get to see your own character standing there, and it's like, hey, I'm there as Agrimar's coming to smash me. Like, I'm the one standing up to him. So to keep the player involved and always remind them that they are the drivers of this world. The World of Warcraft wouldn't be what it is without them. And another cool thing is we have our Chronicle series of books that kind of tell the history of the world. And in the most recent one, which covers a lot of the early history of World of Warcraft, we specifically worked in the fact that, hey, the Horde did this, and it was these heroes, these champions who came together, or it was the Alliance who fought this fight and defeated this great foe, and it was from them working together with these heroes, these mysterious heroes that showed up. So you're literally part of the lore of the world, and I think that's really awesome.
It was extraordinarily trippy to be flipping through Congo, and it says, the Battle of the Wrathgate, and then it's like this historical document talking about this, and there's like, having the inside scoop to the rooms where those decisions were made and being like, that wasn't history, that was just it's an amazing cognitive dissonance on that, but it's amazing to witness, yeah.
That's pretty interesting. I would say also, for the being able to put your own character in the cinematics, I challenge all of you to wear the most ridiculous, early expansion greens possible when interacting with the faction leaders. Make it really epic. See if you can get Sylvanas to side-eye you going, what the heck are you wearing?
She's very judgy about outfits and fashion, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Actually lose faction with Undercity if you're not careful. Speaking of faction, this expansion takes what has been the underlying essence of World of Warcraft and really kind of brings it to an unprecedented level, really emphasizing the actual faction war between the Horde and the Alliance. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys have been building towards and how you're planning to make this a different experience and underlying that aspect of the game's narrative?
Yeah, I think it's always an interesting thing where it frequently comes up, right? The faction war has always been a part of World of Warcraft. Well, the faction conflict has always been a part of World of Warcraft from its earliest days. While the main storyline going on is usually some greater good, greater evil, and we have our tussles between the Horde and Alliance while we're both working toward the same ultimate goal. I would wager to say this is actually the first time that all-out faction war has blown out between the Alliance and Horde, and now the story has diverged completely into two opposing narratives, and that's presented its own challenges in the execution of this that we've really loved diving into.
Yeah, we really embraced that whole theme with this expansion. You know, it was red versus blue, this battle for Azeroth. It's right there in the name. In previous expansions, we've faced some big universal bad. Sargeras is coming. The Legion is here. All these things that kind of forced unity, or at least forced truces between these two sides. But that kind of resentment, those old hostilities, those are never forgotten. That's just the way the world works. And so it was inevitable that when there's Sargeras stabs the world, and now this Azerite, this super powerful substance, has started to manifest across the world. And that's like a super weapon that both sides have to have. And there's nothing like a resource driver like that to really amp up the conflict and say, no, we're going to have that. No, we're going to take that from you. So now we really get the chance to have war at the forefront of the game, and it's really exciting to the point where we've designed this whole expansion around the Horde players have their section, they're trying to recruit allies over here, the Alliance has their section, they're going to this continent to recruit allies, and then those forces will inevitably come into conflict. So it's really awesome.
And that's actually one of the key story germ for Before the Storm was Blizzard approached me and they told me what was going to be going on, and they said, we really want to go deep into both Sylvanas and Anduin and see how they, get into their heads, see what they think, see what they feel. And so that's really what I had in the back of my head when I was writing that, is this deep dive into the characters.
And to that degree, and you spoke earlier about having to step into these characters, really kind of feel them and breathe them as you develop these narratives. How does it feel whenever they give you the note saying, oh, by the way, we're killing off one of your main characters you've lived with for years?
Well, I have been doing this for 27 years, and it never gets easier. But, I do understand. This is the thing about working with a game that's even greater than other IPs, is a game is really a living entity. It can change right up to the moment of shipping. There are patches that bring in new content all the time. And so, you need to be prepared to keep up with the pace of it. And they're always looking for ways to make it more interesting, make it more gripping, bring people even firmer in. And that's one of the ways to do it. And another way is also introducing new characters, and that's great to do too.
And decisions like that, like killing off a major character, it's never arbitrary. It's, the way I look at it is when you have a really cohesive world and you have this involved story with characters who feel real and relatable, the story kind of tells you where it needs to go in ways. Like, it becomes inevitable that certain things happen, and if you don't let those things happen, it's almost like you're not being true to the story that you've laid. You have to let these things play out, and sometimes you come to a realization that, like, oh my God, this character that I love so much has to die for this thing to happen, for the world to evolve. And it's never easy. We don't make those decisions lightly, but when it has to happen, it has to happen. And the death ain't done yet.
And also sometimes just, chasing the truth of war, right? Not everyone will have a heroic death. Some deaths are tragic in their own right for being so out of nowhere, or, he didn't deserve that. I'm like, dude, if we weren't doing that occasionally, it wouldn't be true to how war feels as a person, to have someone unjustly taken away from you. That's part of the palette of recreating these emotions in a verifiable sense.
That's why I'm really excited about the evolution towards this part of the narrative, partially because it's very easy to make a game experience or a storytelling experience where you have very clearly defined boundaries between what's good and what's evil. The heroes are fighting something that is, an ancient demonic entity that corrupted the cosmos. You pretty much know, okay, he's a bad guy. We'll beat him and feel good about our victory. We're now stepping into territory where we get to really play with those elements of what it means to be just different perspectives. What is good, what is bad, that morally gray between, and having to make hard choices for your faction, for the people you care for, and really see the consequences of the actions you take. And even just the little bits we've seen about the coming expansion, I'm already seeing elements of that definitely going to be played to the forefront.
Yeah. I think my big takeaways before I came to Blizzard, from the Warcraft series, was the reason I fell in love with it at first was that nothing was black and white, right? Nothing. Like, it seemed like every character had some motivations behind the scenes. What you'd expect this faction to be doing is not what they're doing, and vice versa. And that always made me fall in love with just like the potential involved there. So, wanting to carry that legacy forward.
It's a very rich world. It really is, and there's so much there to suss out when you're working with it.
Yeah, and the thing is, we're at a stage now, obviously, we're in beta for the expansion, and we've got the novel that's come out, and people are in that phase where they're kind of like, looking at some of the broadcast lines and saying, hey, this character's saying this, or this character's doing that, I bet this is this and this. As with, I look at Legion as like, when the initial expansion launched, it was just the start of the story. And then over the patches, over the cinematics, over the different media that we wove in there, you kind of take a step back and look at the whole thing, and it tells this cohesive story. And that's the same, that's going to happen with Battle for Azeroth too, where we're just dipping the toes in. We're kind of have this smorgasbord of stories right now, and different characters and narratives, but this is a long-term project, and it takes shape over the months and years to come. So the little bits that you get of story now are going to blossom into a field of flowers.
Yeah, we were talking about
how I got to that.
We were talking about
before,
this, like, if the latest blockbuster
yeah.
movie, 3 months before it was released, scene 3 and 12 leaked. Right? Like, and people are like, oh my gosh, this I need to know the answers right now. The story is That's really kind of what alpha testing is necessitating. Like, we have to test the mechanics, but people are only getting like one piece at a time. Whereas this narrative has been worked out, with Christie, with Steve, and with dozens of other people on the World of Warcraft team responsible for the sub-narratives of the different zones and experiences, like all mini DMs in their own regard of their own territories. But we all try to collaborate to create one consistent narrative. But that's all been constructed to be played and experienced from day one, and that's the only time you're going to get the experience as it was intended to be delivered.
Love that, and I didn't mean to force you to tease the next Field of Flowers expansion.
We put those new butterflies in for a reason, and it's because
it's good spec mapping. It looks pretty
You're
realistic.
not supposed to talk about the butterflies.
spoilers.
But on that, agree. One thing you mentioned these vast teams that you're working with, just to get an idea, like how many people do you work with on your individual teams on a daily basis?
Well, so we have 20-some quest designers, and that's just the quest part. We have a whole room full of encounter designers who do dungeons and raids, and there's huge story beats that happen there. We have systems designers, class designers. We have artists, level designers. We have like everybody, there's hundreds of people on the World of Warcraft team that all come together, that all have to talk to one another in order to make that consistency, that continuity of a world come together. So on any day I'm interacting with dozens of people, and the passion that drives all of us to come together and make the best thing possible, super inspiring.
Yep. And on the story and franchise development side, our studio contains Blizzard Animation, or Blizzard Cinematics. And that group also includes the ones that are making the 2.5D motion graphic novels, the creative development. I'll let Christie speak more to that. But I'd say we have a couple hundred artists, but they work on all of Blizzard's IPs, right? Whether it's an Overwatch cinematic or a Heroes of the Storm cinematic, this same group is usually diverting to whichever needs the next thing. Whereas my group that I usually work with, the in-game cinematics for WoW, is kind of a smaller, dedicated group of probably between 20 and 30 people that work on all of the in-game content for World of Warcraft.
Yeah, and I also work for story and franchise development, and I'm a subset of creative development, the writers group. And there's really only about 15 people that I work with, but every day I'm at meetings with Steve or with Alex or, with someone from Heroes of the Storm. So I work with all of the various games teams at one time or another.
I will say I've met a number of people from different facets of the company, on low-level development to upper tier development, and there's a very good sense of collaboration in Blizzard that kind of makes me feel good about the properties. I mean, the reason I'm here is because I believe in what you guys do and have since I was very young, when the first Warcraft came out in Diablo. So keep that up. That's what I'm saying. You guys do a good job of building that atmosphere, that kind of creative collaboration. So don't.
And we're 2 months out from launch for Battle for Azeroth. Some of you may have seen that we've released a couple comics so far. Some of them written or co-written by Christie, and Steve was involved in the Three Sisters comic. There's more content that will be coming out soon that will ramp up to the launch. Some of it we have not talked about yet, but it's really exciting. There's some surprises waiting for you.
What surprises would those be, Taryn?
Between now and launch day.
Good surprises.
Some stuff that we've never tried before, so it's really, really exciting.
Speaking of launch day, you guys are launching August 13th at 3 p.m. Pacific worldwide. Is that correct?
Right.
Simultaneous worldwide launch. It's the first time we've ever done that.
Yes.
All regions get to play at the same time. We have just amazing engineers who are just as passionate as in all the rest of our team, and they take a lot of pride in being able to do this for our players. Rather than have some people be able to log in, other people waiting, hit the ground running. Everybody in there, the whole world is going to fight for Azeroth.
I can't wait for everyone to be clicking on that same spyglass and the warlords to go and start their freaking garrison. I don't have a problem with that. Speaking of worldwide, to touch on here, we have the final moments here of the panel. It's one thing to build a story with a handful of important characters, to develop 5 to 10 major players in your narrative. You guys have hundreds and hundreds of important story characters that you have to develop, maintain consistency with their personality and traits. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's an embarrassment of riches to work with, honestly. We have so many characters, and different people love different characters for different reasons. So we really get to look at what's the story we're trying to tell, what are the best characters, who would be most involved in this, who would have the biggest stakes, and we try to bring those in. So some expansions, some of our major characters might sit out for a while, then they come back in. We've got Jaina Proudmoore, who's been kind of out of the scene for a while. She's front and center in this one. So that's really exciting.
At long last.
At long last.
Jaina is having her moment in the spotlight in World of Warcraft.
Is she a Dreadlord?
We're out of time, so...
Well, no, thank you guys really much. If I can get a quick round of applause for our fantastic panel for Steve, Taryn, and Christie. Super excited to see what comes up in the Battle of Azeroth expansion personally. Once again, you can look forward to that releasing August 13th in just a couple months, worldwide at 3 p.m. Pacific. I'm Mathew Mercer. Thank you for letting me be your moderator for this panel. I hope you have a wonderful day at E3, and thank you very much.
Thank you.